demonstrated the very opposite. For the physical scars you bear to this day, we say sorry. We also recognise that many of you bear the emotional scars, the humiliation, the stigma, the neglect. That so many of you were made to feel so worthless when you were and you are worth so much. The heartbreak and humiliation dealt to you, we say sorry. For those of us who grew up safe, connected and nurtured, it's impossible to imagine. But for those who lived it, the impact is not only historical but enduring. To those with families of your own, we apologise that the burden of your experience often carries on in your relationships with your children and grandchildren. And we apologise too to those who experienced the so-called care made having your own family an impossibility. We also acknowledge the challenges many of you faced in building healthy, loving relationships. And we acknowledge your courage and the incredible support and understanding of your husbands, wives, partners and families in proving that love is always possible. Many of you were also denied that most basic right, knowing who you are. Instead, you were forced to piece together your identity and history from your records, documents that were either incomplete or blacked out, or littered with lies made up about you and your family. We are sorry this made the wounds even deeper. We also apologise for the opportunities missed and the potential left unrealised, for the way your health was neglected, often with a lifetime of consequences, for the lies and low expectations that curled up and took root inside your hearts, to these bright children full of life who could have done anything, been anything, but instead had their childhood and their education cut short. For the unpaid child labour, work that should have belonged to adults, boys forced to toil on farms, in vegetable gardens and other manual labour, and girls in laundries, scrubbing floors and long hours looking after younger children. To you, we say sorry. Because it's not just what happened in those institutions, but also outside of them. When you were old enough to leave, many of you were simply discarded, often with no more than the clothes on your back. You went from having every element of your life controlled, regimented and policed, to being completely alone. Nowhere to fall back on, no one to turn to. You were left unprepared for a world that had, until that point, treated you with disdain and indifference. For all of this and more, we say sorry. Sorry is just a word. It requires action and even more commitment. Today as a parliament, we take the first step towards righting those wrongs and commit ourselves to doing more and doing better to protect Victoria's children, past, present and future. Speaker, the term Ward of the State first appeared in Victorian legislation in the 1887 Neglected Children's Act. And for the next century, those 4 words would be the basis of untold hurt for thousands of Victorian children and their family. Today, I want to talk about some of that. Because it was on that basis that our state assumed responsibility for a child to the exclusion of parental rights. Placed in orphanages, missions, children's homes and foster care, they became, in the words of one survivor, the government's children. And it was on that basis that more than 90,000 Victorian children were placed in care between 1928 and 1990. Many of them subsequently physically and emotionally abused and neglected. They were sent to places with quaint-sounding names that were anything but. Homes that offered none of the love or security we associate with the word. Today, Speaker, we are here to bear witness to the lives that were changed forever by the actions of the state, of the churches and charities that carried out these policies in our names, and of the child welfare agencies, police and justice systems that enforced them. It began, Speaker, with a misguided moralising, much of it rooted in classism, because instead of supporting parents who were struggling to put food on the table, instead of helping fathers who had returned from serving their nation and were grappling with the aftermath, instead of assisting mothers, many of whom were isolated or alone, the government thought it knew better and could do better. Unmarried couples, single mums and dads, those who had the misfortune of just being poor or sick. The state set its sights on the most vulnerable in our community, making judgments with the stroke of a pen that would change the course of someone's life forever. When you listen to their stories, it's that casual indifference, that careless cruelty that is often the hardest to bear. The arrogance and incompetence of officials who thought they knew better. There are many stories of the abuse children in care experienced during this time, but I want to tell you about what we did to Heather and what we said about Heather's mum and her sister. In 1958, Heather ran away from St Catherine's Girls' Home in Geelong when she was 9, searching for her mother. Mum lived in West Geelong and Heather was determined to be reunited with her. The first night, she slept under a